I have Hornet Kane's most famous book about the Louisiana scandals. I'm talking about Louisiana Hayride, and I want to read you a short portion of it, and I'm quoting. Bloody Monday brought one of the most frenzied scenes in Louisiana legislative records. John B. Fournette, Huey's Speaker of the House, had obviously been forewarned of trouble. As the session started, he ignored a request by Representative Cecil Morgan to speak on personal privilege. Angry protests came from all sides. Morgan shouted, "I have in my hand an affidavit that the governor has tried to procure the assassination of a member of this House." Speaker Fournette ordered the sergeant to seat Morgan. 25 members formed a human barrier about the representative amid wild cries and screams. That was Louisiana history in 1929. My guest today is a distinguished American, Dean Cecil Morgan, Dean Emeritus at Tulane University. I'm not going to talk a great deal with Dean Morgan about his background. Let me just brush over it. It is an illustrious background. Dean Morgan is one of those men who has succeeded in everything. He came from Shreveport. He was educated in a one-room country school in East Feliciana. He attended Baton Rouge High, got a degree at LSU in law, was deputy clerk of court in East Baton Rouge Parish, served in World War I as a second lieutenant, served in the House of Representatives and the state Senate, was a district judge, joined Standard Oil, then of New Jersey, in 1936, rose to be the head of their Department of Government Affairs and a member of their board of directors, retired, became dean of the Tulane Law School, from which he retired in 1968. Now, each one of those things, because Dean Morgan, born in 1898, is such a remarkable man. He is a walking history book. But instead, I want to center on that unbelievable period of Louisiana history when a young representative, Cecil Morgan, and some of his cohorts decided that they were going to impeach the closest thing Louisiana has ever known to God on earth, Huey Pierce Long. Dean Morgan, why'd y'all want to get rid of him?
Because the history that we knew of him, and having known him as a law practitioner in Shreveport, we believed that he was unfit for the office of governor to start out with. We had not been associated with him in his campaign for governor in 1924. We did not support him in 1928, and I had no intention of being a candidate for office, but my friends got around me and more or less forced me into running for office, and I suddenly found myself a member of the Louisiana Legislature at the time that Huey P. Long became governor. We did not feel obligated to him for anything, and when he chose to try to get his candidate in the speakership, we in our caucus and in our area of the country chose to elect as speaker, if we could, Clark Hughes from Bossier Parish. And so we had our little caucus that met here when the legislature did and decided to ignore Huey's insistence that John B. Fournette be the speaker, and we voted for Clark Hughes. That more or less set the stage for the opposition to Huey P. Long. Now, we were not planning on anything then except in our conversations and in our discussion of our position in this administration, we and our constituency feared the administration of Huey Long. They didn't want what they considered this wild man to govern the state. They recognized that the state needed something, and it was the day for the young men, and the young men said, "We've just got to keep this Huey Long from dominating this state because we want to do some things for the state in a better manner than was considered that Huey would pursue." And Huey had the genius of attacking everything that was big and strong and that we thought was helpful to the state, in order to demonstrate, I think, in his own demagogic manner, that he was not afraid of the big bad wolf, whoever that was. And so we were afraid of his methodology, and we just simply didn't trust him. And that's the way we started off.
How dangerous was it to be against Huey Long at that time?
It was at that time just the danger of his ill will, and the fact that we did know he would be vindictive, and the fact that we knew we would have trouble accomplishing anything in his opposition, because he did not brook opposition.
Were you frightened, Dean Morgan?
There wasn't anything for me to be frightened about. All I had to do was just do what I represent my constituency and do what I thought was right.
Was there a possibility of physical violence?
There was always that possibility, because a lot of people, as his administration moved on, encountered things that indicated there could be violence. But then that grew as he became more defensive and felt that he needed bodyguards, and felt that his opposition had to be treated with. And when we got down here and were really fighting him, and the issues were squarely drawn, and we saw some of the things that were going on, and the threats and all of that to others, we knew that there was danger of physical violence because the feeling was constantly increasing. The strain on everybody was so great. You must remember that was a time when there was real depression. It was a time when there was no such thing as Social Security, and jobs meant everything to people. There was poverty amongst people who had not suffered poverty, and only the people with jobs could exist. And so when their jobs were threatened, and Huey had no compunctions about threatening anybody's job, there was no civil service, so there was patronage was the important thing. He used all of those things to drive people into submission, and that made a lot of people pretty bitter and scared. The tension was exceedingly high, and it continuously grew.
Were people armed in the legislature?
After the tensions got so high, they were. And nobody could be quite sure when something serious would break out.
Tell us about Bloody Monday.
Well, I'm surprised. I'd forgotten that Harnett Kane had used that term. I'm a little bit surprised because the press picked it up, but we in the legislature and all of us in the opposition and those who went through it never called it Bloody Monday, and I don't now. I called it the Night of the Hullabaloo. That's the way I refer to the 25th of March, 1929. That was the night of the Hullabaloo. We had established ourselves in a little caucus that met every night in J.Y. Sanders Jr.'s office here in Baton Rouge, and planned our strategy for the next day, and saw what bills were coming up and what we would do. And remember that we had no staffs, no means.
How many were there in your group?
It was such an amorphous group, and it was so informal. It was just a voluntary group of people that were willing to identify themselves with opposition to any extent, even though it was limited. There were approximately a third of the legislature that were involved in it one time or one way or another, and there were about a third in the hardcore of the Huey Long side, and about a third who were swing votes and uncommitted, and everybody was bidding for their adherence to their side of the issue. So there was a certain amount of leadership in each of those groups, and never enough real leadership in that legislature to do anything on a permanent basis. If you remember, there was no person in that opposition who ever, and there was a good many able people, but there was no person in that opposition who ever ran for governor in that House of Representatives.
So no one utilized it as a stepping stone?
Nobody utilized that as a stepping stone, and all of us, I think, in our activities, all of us knew that, or it was impressed upon us by the activities of Huey, that to oppose Huey was political suicide.
Were many people in that group later defeated for office? Do you recall?
Well, J.Y. Sanders Jr. did go to Congress and lasted a term.
Yes, sir.
I'm not quite sure. I was elected to the state Senate and only served a short period, because when I got to the Senate and served in the OK Allen Stooge government period, there were 3 of us who stuck to our opposition to Huey Long, and the only 3 votes in that administration on political issues that were opposed to him. One was Mr. Boudreaux from Abbeville, one was J.Y. Sanders Jr., and one was myself. And whenever there was a political issue, we were the 3 votes against the administration, and all of the others supported the administration for one reason or another. And had some experiences that demonstrated it, because we had gotten through some legislation, and Huey came down from Washington and saw to it that it was ultimately defeated, just among those who were supporting it.
Was he capable of charm, in your opinion? Could he be charming?
I don't know that I like to use that term, but he could be. He had a lot of animal magnetism. He had a dynamic attraction. I don't like to use the word charisma about it either, because that's a nice word. But at any rate, he could be a spellbinder. Yeah. And he could have had his pleasant moments. And he had some sense of humor. But he was too seriously crude in his approach to everything, and had no concern for the facts. It was just dominance. And his ambitions, of course, were all for power. It was power with him.
Finally, he wanted to be president, I think.
Oh, I'm sure he did, and he would certainly have given Mr. Roosevelt a considerable riffle at the time that he switched from supporting Roosevelt to opposing him, simply because he wanted to dominate that situation.
Would it be fair to say that despite all of the negative qualities which a handful of you were willing to put your lives on the line to expose, was he a genius?
He had a lot of qualities of genius. He had a marvelous mind if he had just had with it a balance wheel. And if he had just had with that marvelous mind and capacity, if he had just had a scruple, if he had had something to negative this overweening ambition for power, he could have been a very great man.
Tell us about the night of the hullabaloo, as you call it.
All right, well, in our little caucus that we called the Dynamite Squad, we met every night. Our objective generally was to discredit him with the populace who, large portion of whom just worshipped him and didn't think he could do anything wrong. Another large portion of them had a real personal interest in supporting him because, as I said, jobs meant everything. And we were trying to discredit him in every way that was legitimate. And on this particular night, in came my good friend and colleague from Caddo Parish, Harney Bogan, who said that he had this affidavit signed by Battling Bozeman, who had been one of Huey's bodyguards, and that Battling Bozeman alleged and swore under oath that Huey Long had tried to persuade him or bribe him to bring about the assassination of Huey P. Long. I mean, of J.Y. Sanders, Jr., that Huey P. Long had tried to bring it about. And all that was under oath. And here we were sitting in our little caucus trying to decide what to do. We knew really that the 5 cent a barrel refinery tax that Huey had proposed against the Standard Oil here in Baton Rouge had largely, the defeat of it had largely been secured. But it needed cinching, and it needed to be demonstrated that Huey didn't have the strength to do it, and that his methodology was such that we couldn't stomach it. And so this was an opportunity to get before the public something about his methods of dealing with his opposition. And so, trying to make this a little shorter,
yes, sir.
The caucus pointed their finger at me and said, well, you be the one to get it presented before the House, and we drafted a resolution that didn't say we charged that it was true, but we said we definitely have a sworn affidavit that it is true, and it deserves the consideration of this House of Representatives because it's an attack on one of the members of this House, and a serious attack, and it should be examined by this House to determine what ought to be done and what the truth is. And so that's what I was insisting upon, and I knew by that time, they knew what was in our camp, we knew what was in theirs. We knew that they were going to attempt to adjourn the House sine die because they were just going to run away from this thing, and we were determined that we were at least going to get it before the public. So I rose as soon as the formalities of organizing the House that night had been gone through. I rose and started talking. I knew that Fournette would not recognize me. He was the speaker at that time. So the only thing I could do was just get up and talk, and that I did. And Fournette ordered the sergeant-at-arms to put me in my seat, and I moved from my seat down the aisle to go to the podium, and was talking all the time and waving this document and telling them I have in my hand a sworn affidavit that Huey P. Long has tried to bring about the assassination of J.Y. Sanders, Jr., a member of this House, and this House should investigate it. And while I was trying to explain all of that, here some of my friends gathered around me and locked arms to protect me from the sergeant-at-arms. I think we presented the best comedy that the people had observed in a long time. The sergeant-at-arms plucking at my coattails in at least an ostensible effort to carry out the orders of the speaker, put me off the floor and put me at my seat. And they gathered around to protect me from the sergeant-at-arms. And while all of this was going on, Fournette recognized Frugier, who sat right in front of me, and Frugier moved that the House do now adjourn sine die, and Fournette put the question, and the board flashed an enormous vote in favor of it, including my vote, which of course was ridiculous. I hadn't pushed my button at all, but it showed I was moving for adjournment when I wasn't. And so we went down to the podium, and I continued my speech, and when any number of the legislators saw that their button had been pushed in their absence and contrary to their wishes, it created the hullabaloo. And one fight broke out after another all over the floor of the House of Representatives, and right under my nose almost to the left, one of our group, whose name was Clinton Sayers, was being pummeled and rushed down in front of me, and we were worried about him, and Harney Bogan couldn't get to him, so he climbed up on some of the desks, stepped from one to another, and plunged head first into this melee and brushed some of them aside and came up with Clinton Sayers, and Clinton Sayers had marks of brass knucks on his forehead, and that's the only blood I saw that night. And why we didn't see more, I do not know. With the arms that were there and the opportunity and the bitterness of feeling and the fisticuffs that were going on all over the place, it was a hullabaloo. Well, eventually, in the middle of all of this, several people got up and tried to bring order out of chaos and objected to the ruling of the chair. Mason Spencer, a hulk of a fellow from northeast Louisiana and New Orleans, was the spokesman for our little informal dynamite squad group, our caucus. So he climbed up on the top of a desk and did what nobody else had been able to do in all of this hullabaloo, and brought the House to order and moved and designated George Ginsburg as temporary speaker, and moved that the House, that the ruling of the chair that the House had adjourned sine die be appealed, and that part of the reports on it were fairly accurate. At any rate, the question was eventually put, and the House overwhelmingly voted to overrule the ruling of the chair, and declared the House had not adjourned, and then he moved that the House do now adjourn until tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. And we sat up all night drafting impeachment proceedings. I had no idea that when the thing started, we would end up trying to impeach him. But that's what did happen. And there had been so much talk about it, obviously, in various groups. There had been preparation made for any time they could find
to impeach him.
To impeach him.
The impeachment failed, did it not?
The impeachment did not fail. A reluctant House of Representatives voted 8 charges of impeachment. And after all, you must remember, impeachment means the equivalent of an indictment.
Yes, sir.
And not a conviction. Now, these articles of impeachment that were voted by the House, a majority of the House could do that. The impeachment question that received the most votes was 59 out of 100, went to the Senate for those charges to be tried before the Senate, sitting as a court of impeachment. And we permitted about 3 weeks to elapse between the sending of these messages to the Senate and the date fixed for the trial. And in that time, Huey, through his certain of his friends and his brother Earl and whatnot, obtained what we call the round robin, the signatures of one more senator than 1/3 when there was the requirement of a 2/3 vote to actually impeach, yes, or declare him guilty in the Senate. And in that time, when we appeared in the Senate to try the case, and lots of preparation had gone into that for the trial, in the preliminary stages, and when we were just ready to start introducing evidence in the Senate, everybody knew what the evidence was because it had already been introduced in the House. But when that commenced, the round robin was presented. And the presiding officer of the Senate, of course, was the Chief Justice of the state of Louisiana. And when it was presented, through certain procedures, it led to the Chief Justice announcing that he had this document, and he called upon each of those senators in turn to rise, and he asked him these questions. Senator so-and-so, is this your signature on this document? He said, yes. Do you mean to say that you will not impeach, not vote for impeachment on these charges? Yes. Now, Senator so-and-so, do you mean to say that you would not vote for impeachment regardless of the evidence? And each one of them answered rather sheepishly and red-faced, as was noticeable. Yes, that's what he said, what he meant.
Let me ask you this. As you look back on it, and obviously it's as fresh as if it happened 20 minutes ago because you tell it with such passion and fire, would you do the same thing again? Do you have any regrets and so on? I'm sure it caused you much personal pain. It
caused me a great deal. It was a most unhappy experience that I had all the way through. But I've tried to analyze my own feelings about it, and I all I wish is I had just been more experienced at that time, but I can't think of anything that I did that was wrong or should have been done differently, except more effectively.
That's quite it's a pity that you never wrote a book about it, you know, because with your legal mind and your articulateness and this experience, it's a pity you haven't written a book on it. You know?
Well, I'm doing some oral history for the New Orleans Historic Collection, and in that I have described it, and it will be in written form and available at any rate.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with Dean Cecil Morgan, a distinguished Louisianian, a distinguished American, who's served his people, his state, his nation, but I think perhaps most important to Cecil Morgan, just in the brief time that I've had the pleasure of being with him, I think he served his conscience. Dean, it's been a great pleasure being with you.
I've enjoyed it, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.